So hi you guys, I will be talking about Rosenhan's study on being sane in insane places. So before diving into what the experiment was about, a few focal points that the study focuses on is sanity and insanity. What makes a person sane versus insane? Commonly, an individual who is sane will show normal behavior, while the insane person will show atypical behavior. But again, what does it mean to see normal behavior? Throughout the world, in different cultures, in different regions, um, normal behavior and insane behavior is displayed differently. Such as in Africa, normal behavior is like dancing around on a ritual. That's normal behavior. But if we saw this in the US, that's very insane behavior because we don't do that. So normal behavior varies throughout the world. Um, so in Rosenhan's study, the study takes place in the year 1973. Rosenhan decides to focus on how sane and insane can be told apart, where there are certain characteristics within the behavior that someone can observe and automatically point out that that person is insane or sane. Rosenhan wanted to see when these participants who are in the study were admitted into psychiatric care, he wanted to see if any of the participants would be discovered that they were sane, and if so, how did the mental staff figure it out? So even Rosehan proposed maybe it was the environments that the patients were being placed in will determine whether they're insane or sane. So when each patient came upon admission, each patient described their symptoms, which was only one symptom, and they explained the symptom as like they heard voices in their head, such as empty, hollow, thud. Admission accepted these patients based on the meaning of their symptom, because the description of the symptom was basically an interpretation for a cry of help, that the patients saw their life as meaningless, etc. So based on this, the facility took the patient's situation and labeled them to be clinically insane, and that they must be placed in a facility. After presenting the pseudo symptom that the pseudo patients were displaying, then the patient automatically said that they no longer experienced the symptom, and then they started displaying their normal behavior. So the patients who did get admitted into treatment, they went undetected by staff. Staff did not notice the same pseudo patients. They just automatically assumed since you're in treatment, you are labeled as clinically insane. So they went undetected by staff. However, the pseudo patients did get detected by the patients who were labeled as clinically insane. Like they pointed out to the pseudo patients that they must be journalists, trying to get information about the hospital, the staff, or the patients. So the staff didn't detect these pseudo patients because they never spent time with the patients. So how are they able to detect these pseudo patients' behavior if they never spent time with them? So another reason why the sane pseudo patients went undetected is that psychiatrists and doctors relied on this test called the type 2 error test. It was basically, it had two kind of functions: a false positive, a false negative. They saw it as a false positive is stating a healthy person is sick, and the false negative is stating that a sick person is healthy. This study indicates that there was a tendency to designate sane people as insane. Like, were these people truly sane, or was it rather that the staff was trying to avoid the type 2 error and being okay of just telling a sane person that they were insane? So once a person is given a label that's associated with a mental disorder, that label will stick. And all the behaviors and characteristics of the person will automatically be associated with that label. So as the patients were admitted and diagnosed with a mental disorder, the diagnosis didn't affect the individual themselves, but the perception of that individual was entirely viewed based on that label of the diagnosis. So throughout their stay in the mental hospital, pseudo patients took notes on their daily routine, such as their experiences and behaviors, etc. The staff viewed these behaviors, the normal behaviors of the pseudo patients, as typical behavior that is seen in an insane patient. Like I said, the staff didn't detect the same behavior or the same pseudo patients, so they just automatically assumed that this is typical behavior for an insane patient since they're in a mental institution. The staff misinterpreted these behaviors as behaviors that must be behavioral manifestation of the disturbance, behaviors that correlate with the mental disorders, such as their disorder was schizophrenia. The staff members thought that it was the patients themselves that were the root of the disorder. The staff never thought, for any reason, that the staff members themselves or the environment that the patient was placed in could have anything to do with the patient's behavior or disorder. When the pseudo patients came to be admitted, they came to be admitted as pretending to be as insane patients. The staff never detected that they were sane patients or they were normal. They were misdiagnosed from the start. So Rosenhan proposed that the patients that were inside the facility, they were responding to a bizarre, unfamiliar environment that can cause unusual behavior that may lead to believe and misinterpreted as atypical behavior. That can cause unusual behavior that may lead to believe and misinterpreted as atypical behavior, such as the staff did with the pseudo patients. Rosenhan found this study to be beneficial on how people's behavior was determined, and it also questioned the validity of psychiatric diagnosis. It was questioning the validity of their method. So there was a replicated study done by Scribner. It was a replicated study off of Rosenhan's study, but it was kind of reversed. Instead of using patients who didn't have a disorder, these patients in this replication study will have a mental disorder. It's 8 patients who had the disorder who had a history of chronic schizophrenia. Upon admission, these patients will prevent their symptoms and their history of the disorder to see whether they will be able to receive treatments based on this disorder that they have. So you would think, since they have a mental disorder and are seeking for psychiatric care, you would think that they would be admitted into facility. However, 6 out of 7 patients were not eligible to receive treatment. Only 1 patient was, and had, like I said, a history of schizophrenia. So upon admission, he described his symptoms, which were kind of similar to Rosenhan's patient symptoms. He basically stated that he heard voices such as hollow and thud, and so he presented these symptoms, and the intake worker said and agreed, yes, your symptoms are very disturbing and whatnot, but sorry, the level of the severity is not high enough for me to put you in placement of treatment. Then the patient says that he felt suicidal and that he felt harm of himself and of others. So that completely changed the whole entire game. The intake worker was like, okay, now this meets the criteria of the level of severity to be placed in treatment. So the patient was placed in treatment overnight. He was placed on Q15s, gets checked up on every 15 minutes. So he was admitted, got psychiatric care for 1 night. The next day, he said he wasn't hearing these voices. Upon discharge, he got into his car and he went to the nearest bridge. In Rosenhan's study, the problem was is that the professional psychiatrists were okay misdiagnosing and granting unnecessary treatment to individuals who were not presenting mental disorders, while as in this study, it shows the difficulty of receiving treatment in modern times such as today with a mental disorder that is present and that needs immediate treatment. In a critique by Bartel and Peters, they first point out that when the patients in the study were trying to be admitted into the mental facility, they only presented 1 symptom of the mental disorder of schizophrenia. This posed as kind of as a flaw, just because it was only 1 symptom. Usually today, 2 or more symptoms of schizophrenia needs to be present, not just 1. Doesn't really qualify as a mental disorder. It was that after being admitted, the patients no longer experienced the symptom anymore, and they started to behave in their normal behavior. And according to Rosenhan, the hospital staff interpreted the patient's normal behavior as abnormal behavior of schizophrenia. However, Bartel and Peters point out that when looking back at staff notes, yes, the staff observed the patient's behavior, but they never specifically what type of behavior to what mental disorder. That was all Rosehan stated. Another thing is that Rosenhan's study suggested that the hospital staff did not spend enough time observing the patients in order to recognize their sane behavior. But again, the critique of the study suggests that the time evidence of Rosenhan's study was tampered with and not accurate. Kind of left out some data, kind of altered the days spent in treatments. So I hope this presentation presented enough information for you to get some understanding about Rosenhan's study on being sane and insane. This study is very relevant to today because it is a foundation that is being used today in the medical world, especially when diagnosing a person for a mental disorder as being sane or clinically insane. Though Rosenhan's study may not be taught in a lot of courses or being seen in a lot of textbooks, it does show how people did it back in the day, how Rosenhan wanted to figure out a question about insanity and sanity. So I hope you guys got enough information for the study. So yeah, bye!